Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Abubakar from the Department of English and Literary Studies here in Bayero University, Kano. You're welcome to the first semester of 2020-2021 academic session. By the grace of God, I'm going to guide you through English. I'm in GSP 1201, 2201, the use of English. I understand that this group comprises applied biology and plant biology students. So you're welcome once again. Before we begin saying anything about the modules, let me briefly explain what the whole segment of this course is all about. That is, this of English. Actually, the purpose of this course isn't to make you speak or write English in a perfect way, or to make you perfect speakers of the language. Indeed, no such thing as perfect does exist. Why? Because in Nigeria generally, we all speak English as a second language, which we generally refer to as the L2. In other words, we are not speaking it as native speakers, rather as learners who aspire to improve. And for anybody to improve, there's really the need for additional hard work. Since we are all adults and we've already imbibed the language system and habits of our own mother tongue, therefore we should be able to learn another language only through extra hard work, which means we are all required to put extra efforts in order for us to improve, since we are not like young children who find learning other languages far easier than adults. So this issue of hard work is quite essential as far as language learning is concerned. And generally in this module, that is the use of English, we should find ourselves revolving around 4 basic skills of language learning, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So the first module here is known as vocabulary development. The module comprises the following elements: denotation and connotation, registers and jargons, phrasal verbs, idioms. Word meaning can be understood from so many different angles, such as context, base, or word origin, and so on. The origin of word or etymology. Etymology refers to the origin of words. Indeed, it is believed that many English words originated from other languages like Latin, Greek, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and many others. Sound or onomatopoeic words. This is a technique that suggests the meaning of a word from the sound it produces. For example, the hissing of the snake, the whisper of innumerable bees, the meow of a cat, the baa of a sheep, or the crow of a cock. Root or base of a word. Affixation. All words are believed to have roots or base. This gives us insight into the meaning of the word in question. For example, mind is a root word. We can have another word built by joining some other parts of word to the root mind. For example, we can have ful, full, added to the end of the word, which we call affixation. So in that case, when you join mind and full, you can have mindful. You can as well add a word to the root of the word from the beginning. For example, you can add un to the root word mind, and then you can have unmindful, which you call prefix, meaning that when the addition comes at the beginning of the word, we call it a prefix. And when it comes at the end of the word, we call it an affix, and the whole we call it a suffix, and the whole process is known as affixation. Loan words. These are words that are borrowed from other languages and are used in the new language without changing the form of the word. For example, Kudecha is borrowed from the French, Safari from Arabic, Anonymous from Greek, and so on. Grammatical category of a word. Knowing the word class of a word helps us to understand the meaning of a word. For example, when you know a given word is an action word, that is a verb and not a noun, that seems to accelerate the possible understanding of the word meaning. Context. Well, generally context plays a prominent role in determining the meaning of a word. For example, the word chilled may mean different things depending on the circumstance and the context. For example, in poetry, normally when you see the word chilled in poetry, it symbolizes death. As in a poem, when a poet says, "Death lays his icy hands on kings." Taken in another environment, in another context, it could mean enjoyment, especially when the referent is between lovers, for example. A native speaker of a language has the intuitive or innate knowledge of his language. And likewise, a competent user of a language has an intuitive knowledge of the language as well. And this can only be achieved through extensive reading and exposure to the second language. The dictionary. As far as understanding the meaning of words is concerned, dictionary should only be resorted at the tail end, after you must have tried all other means, which includes listening to good speakers of a language, and maybe trying to understand the meaning of a word through context, which we call contextual meaning, and then finally consulting the dictionary. Denotation and connotation. When we say denotation, it refers to the actual meaning of a word, where the referent is easily identifiable. For example, in denotation, when we say a lion, it refers to a four-legged, fierce, and strong animal. A pen is it simply means a writing material, and a tree is a kind of plant that grows outside. But in connotation, you can find that these words have an entirely different meaning. For example, the word lion used as a connotation could refer to something entirely different. For example, if we see maybe something like Ahmad is a lion, it doesn't mean that literally he's a lion, but rather meaning that he's a very strong person, a very strong character. For example, when you see the word pen in poetry, normally it doesn't refer to a writing material, but rather it symbolizes knowledge, where also tree normally symbolizes life. The color white normally symbolizes peace. For example, when we see the tree is a queen dressed in garments of green, you find that here in denotation, the queen is given a kind of literary interpretation, which we call personification. That is a situation where you give an inanimate object the qualities of human being, trying to give life to it. In understanding the two concepts, that is denotation and connotation, we normally try to detect the similarities between the two. And while trying to detect the similarities, we're inevitably looking at their differences also, that is the different features that each of them have. So one is that both denotative and connotative meanings are types of meanings available to every language user. And secondly, denotative meaning identifies items in the world. For example, donkey, which refers to a four-legged animal, usually used for carrying loads, while in connotative meaning, it is used in an entirely different sense, which could be different in different cultures and social groups. For example, it could mean somebody who behaves badly, an impudent person in another culture, for example. Um, what- Literary writings normally use connotative meanings, and they use them so much in literary writing. For example, these of metaphor, simile, personification, irony, paradox, synonymy, personification, and so on and so forth. Connotation carries negative and positive meanings depending on the circumstances, depending on the environment, depending on the context. This is why some synonyms differ in either the negative or positive implication of the word. A word may be positive to A but negative to B. For example, when you use the word childlike, this could be positive when the referent is a child, for example. But when you use the word childlike to an adult, in fact, it's quite derogatory. Likewise, the word youthful. Statesman could be positive in some sense and negative in others. Likewise, the word liberty, which could be positive to Americans, and freedom could be positive to South Africans, but negative to Americans. Next item is registers and jargons. Register refers to the technical vocabulary of a profession, trade, or activity. For example, we can have legal register, medical register, literary register, linguistic register, tourism, football, and so on and so forth. And this professional use of language is known as registers. It is necessary and useful for members of the professional group to use the specialized vocabulary in their field, that is, registers, as a sign of expertise of the profession. Some professions and their registers. In legal profession, these registers are quite in use. For example, the word plaintiff, prosecutor, writ, defendant, appellant, mandamus, accused, petitioner. In linguistics, we have these peculiar registers: phoneme, allophone, plosives, rounded vowels, allomorph, syllabic, consonant, and so on. In politics, these registers are quite unique. They are controversy, eloquence, declare, candidate, strategy, bank, canvas, veto, adverse, jubilant, gracious, charisma. Religion normally uses the following registers: blasphemy, animism, Buddhism, agnosticism, atheism, ecclesiastic, episcopal, evangelical, ecumenical, Eucharist, heresy, and so on. For medical registers, there are words like acute, abrasion, abscess, autopsy, biopsy, diagnosis, edema, fracture, malignant, benign, etc. From literature, these registers can easily be found. For example, theory, psychoanalysis, simile, personification, metaphor, synecdoche, paradox, etc. Registers and jargons. Jargon is an obscure and pretentious use of language. It is marked by a roundabout way of expression, which entails the use of long and pompous words which are often unnecessary and inappropriate and may even eventually prove to be offensive. The major aim of the speaker is try to impress the audience and in fact in the process even impede communication, because the communication normally suffers because words tend to be barriers to understanding. They try to block the reader's understanding. To test if an expression is a jargon, we ask this question: can it be said in simple words without impeding the speaker's intent? If the answer is yes, it is a jargon. If the answer is no, it is a register. For example, 1. Jellyfish circumnavigate. This is jargon because one can simply and easily and straightforwardly see cars move. Example 2. The word contains an allemorph. This is a register because it cannot be said in a better language without going into obscurity. Phrasal verb is a group of words which consist of a verb and other particles, where the particles are preposition, P, or adverb, A, or both. In essence, phrasal verbs can have these structures: V plus P, which is equal to call off, V plus A, which is equal to add up, V plus A, which is equal to catch up with. There's normally a corresponding lexical verb for every phrasal verb, which means the same as the phrasal verb. For example, look for, which means to search. Put off, which means to extinguish. Object to means to refuse or reject something. Bring up, meaning to raise. Phrasal verbs are then divided into further groups, which are both separable and non-separable. For example, some phrasal verbs can take a word inserted between the verb and the particle. For instance, bring up versus bring your child up, or call up versus call the strike off, put off versus put the fire off. Non-separable phrasal verbs are those phrasal verbs which cannot take a word inserted between the verb and the particle. For example, look for, hold on, stop by, hang out, sit up. Again, phrasal verbs are divided into literal and non-literal groups. The literal groups, just as the name implies, denote meaning which are not taken idiomatically, while the non-literal phrasal verbs take literary or idiomatic interpretation. For example, look up or down can take a literal meaning which indicates or implies an upward or downward gaze, that is looking. This phrasal verb look down can take a non-literal meaning, which means merciful. May God look down, for example, may God look down upon them. Other examples include hang on, which means to persevere, sit up, which means to pay attention. Next is idiom. What is an idiom? Idiom is a group of words whose meaning cannot ultimately be predicted by the sequence of words that comprises the given structure, which means that idioms are normally opaque or obscure in nature. These idioms, again, tend to be archaic and incapable of change, meaning that they remain as they are and normally they don't change over time. So idiom involves a kind of collocation that is The company award keeps, where award in an idiom, an idiomatic phrase cannot be substituted with another word. For example, when we say he kicked the bucket, cannot be changed to he played the bucket or he chucked the basket. Other examples of idiomatic expressions include to pie down, which is an informal way to tell someone to stop talking or to make less noise. Another example is hang in there, which means to wait and be patient. Stuck to your guns, which means to refuse to change one's plan or position, to remain unmoved. When we say someone is full of beans, it means someone is excited, energetic, lively, or enthusiastic. Another idiomatic expression is to bite off more than one can chew, which implies that for someone to take on something that is too much for him to handle. Another example is to be under the weather, meaning to be ill or to fall sick. To rock the same boat, for example, I'm rocking the same boat with you, which means that I'm having the same view, the same experience, or the same perspective with you. Well, generally, well, class, this brings us to the end of the first slide. And if you look at what we have so far discussed, generally you find that we have seen items like vocabulary development, origin of words or etymology, onomatopoeic words, root or base words, loan words, grammatical category of a word context, denotation and connotation, intuition, register and jargons, phrasal verbs, idioms, and idiomatic expressions. This generally what comprises this first slide. And by the grace of God, I hope to meet you in the second slide. So now I'll be awaiting your questions, comments, suggestions, even corrections if you like. Thank you so much. Good day. Meet you again next time. Thank you. Why? Because semantically, they are like single word, but they don't function like a word. Why? Because they don't change and they don't take grammatical features like nouns as plural form. For example, when it is car, it's almost always a car. Or a verb takes tense from cook to cooked. This doesn't happen as far as English idioms are concerned. Or another example, to kick the bucket cannot be expressed as to kick the buckets, or to spill the bean to be rendered into to spill the beans. They don't change, meaning that they are static, they are unchanged. So I think this brings us to the end of this first slide, and by the grace of God, we shall meet in another lesson. But before then, I should be awaiting your questions, comments, suggestions, corrections, and whatsoever you may have. Thank you very much, and good day.